Crazy story time about how my mom kidnapped my sister. So my mom and dad split whenever I was really young. And at this time, they were always in and out of court battling for custody over my sister and I. Well, the one day my dad drives my mom downtown to the courthouse because she didn't have a ride. And before she gets out of the car, she's like, "Can I give the girls a hug?" And my dad was like, "Yeah, go ahead." Little background information. I was more of a daddy's girl. My sister was more of a mommy's girl, which is probably the reason why she took her. I was sitting by the window, my sister was sitting in the middle seat. So she gives me a hug. Next thing I know, my sister's seatbelt was unbuckled and my mom was running across the street with her in the middle of downtown. Didn't even look for cars. So my dad got out of the car, ran over, grabbed her, picked both of them up and walked over to the sidewalk, and my mom was screaming bloody murder. So this guy called the cops and my dad was trying to show them custody papers because he had full custody. But the cop knew my mom, so he let her take my sister. We got her back, but I didn't see this bitch for like 4 months.
13, my friend Sally and I were having a sleepover. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids, which is what I think drew me to her at first. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. Her family was pretty religious and wouldn't let us watch horror movies, so we ended up watching Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I were hanging out in a room, listening to music and giving each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than what we really were. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my bestie at the time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She also had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. She showed me some texts between her and a guy that she was talking to, which mostly consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him and the usual online creep stuff. According to him, he was 19. However, looking at the picture that he sent, this man was clearly at least 40 and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Suddenly, we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation and I heard him say, "You're so pretty, why don't you come meet me?" Sally said she couldn't because she was spending the night with her friend. This sparked his interest. That's when he proceeded to try and ask us both to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. When I was around 13, my friend Part 2 of why you shouldn't sneak out. She planned for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet this creep in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go, but Sally adamantly pleaded, saying that she didn't feel safe going by herself, so I agreed. We took our phones and I stuffed a kitchen knife in my bra in case something went wrong. The route we took was dark and deserted. When we got to the parking lot, we saw a beat-up Toyota Corolla. From what I could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out and left the door open behind him as he approached us. I turned on my flash to see and I could tell he was on something. His eyes were so wide they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. I suddenly became conscious of how big he was. He was about 6'2" and around 280 pounds. Sally and I were both significantly smaller than him. That's when he reached out and grabbed Sally by the arm. His friends got out of the car and he invited us back to the car for booze and drugs. I quickly took my knife out and when he saw it, he released her. I pulled Sally by the arm and ran faster than I ever had in my life. When we got to her home, we locked the doors, closed the blinds, and didn't sleep all night as we peeked out the window in case they followed us. To our dismay, this same Toyota was circling around her apartment building not once, not twice, but 3 times. After this, Sally and I stopped talking because she was mad at me for ruining her night. However, I think it was for the best. And I have been dating for over 3 years. His birthday was coming up and I wanted it to be special. I decided to pick out a day where I went to the mall and got things that I thought he'd like and put it all together as a big present. While I was there, I ran into a friend of his named Matt. I told Matt what I was planning and since he was his close friend, I asked him if he'd be willing to help me pick out some things. Matt of course agreed, so we hit up some shops to find things that we both thought my boyfriend would really like. My boyfriend and I had recently moved in together and I knew that he was working, but his job's hours are always changing, so I didn't know when he'd get home. I didn't want him to catch me red-handed with all of the things before I hid them, so I asked him what he was doing and when he'd be home. That's when he told me that he was already off work and hanging out with Matt at the bars. This immediately stopped me in my tracks because there was no way he'd be hanging out with him since Matt was just a few feet away from me in the store. When I told Matt, he was confused too because he was never asked by my boyfriend to hang out at the bar. We have a very trusting relationship, so normally I'd believe him, but in this case I knew that it was a lie. I wasn't sure what to do because he's never lied to me before, or at least I've never caught him in a lie like this. That's when I decided to go home and wait for him. My boyfriend and I have been dating. Part 2 of how my boyfriend lied to me about who he was with. When my boyfriend got home, he acted completely normal. I asked him how it was hanging out with Matt at the bar. He told me about his day and told me how him and Matt just grabbed a few drinks nonchalantly. This made me angry because I knew he was lying, but I wasn't sure how to bring up the truth. I also didn't know how to tell him that I was hanging out with Matt without bringing up that I was also shopping for his birthday present. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt and let it be. However, when we were laying in bed later that night, I couldn't take it anymore and confronted him. I told him I ran into Matt at the mall when he texted me, so I know it wasn't Matt who he was hanging out with. He quickly got frazzled and I could tell he was trying not to tell me something. However, this only made me more curious. Finally, he told me to wait a minute and he left the room. When he came back, I sat up and he came to my side of the bed. He took out a box from behind his back and got on one knee. My eyes widened. He confessed that he was out ring shopping for me because he knew I was the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. We had a weekend getaway planned for his birthday and he was going to propose to me on one of the days we were there. I was shocked. Of course I said yes and tackled him in a big hug. We went on our trip together and it was amazing. Now it's a funny story that we tell everyone.
Story time. Someone tried to murder me on a school trip. So during my senior year, I started talking to this guy that we can call Tyler. And and we all had to go on a school trip for a competition. During this, we had to stay in a hotel room and we were all assigned partners. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but I was actually assigned Tyler's ex-girlfriend. We can call her Penny. And when I found out she was his ex, I was like, you know what? Not a big deal. I'm probably just overthinking it, but she had a reputation for being psychotic. And I mean psychotic. Since we were all in close quarters, it didn't take her long to figure out that I was talking to her ex, and she went crazy on me. She basically threatened me by saying that if she ever saw me with him again, I wouldn't be coming home to my family. I still honestly didn't take her that seriously until the next day she saw us kissing, and she left the hotel room to buy throwing knives for when I got back. So when I reached the hotel room that day, she was yelling at me, threatening me, and then she took out one of the knives. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Insta. Part 2 to me almost getting murdered on my school trip. So when Penny took out one of the knives, she literally threw it right at me. Somehow it only managed to land 5 inches from me and I was okay. So I took off running out of the hotel room. I immediately went to our director, and literally because her parents fund most of the band stuff, he straight up couldn't care less. I told my mom, who happened to work with the superintendent's wife, so she told her the whole story and gave my mom his phone number. Let's just say they were suspended and the teacher was fired. She swore up and down that her and Tyler were going to get back together, but it's been 3 years later and she's still crazy and he still hates her, and I'm still with him. So I guess the moral of the story is please take it seriously if someone threatens you.
Pet to school day is banned from my school. I just want everyone to know that this was bound to happen. The kids at my school are super irresponsible. I don't know why the teachers thought this was a good idea. I was one of those really irresponsible kids, and I didn't pay attention to which pets were allowed to be brought to the school. They weren't allowed to stink, they had to be a certain size, and you weren't supposed to bring them on the bus. If you were bringing a pet, you had to be a car rider. Well, I might have broken some of these rules. So I had a pet milk snake. It was about 3 feet in size, and I brought it to school without telling my parents because you had to get a parent signature form. And no, I was not a car rider. I brought it on the bus. I was carrying it in my backpack, and my backpack was all the way zipped up, so there was no way for it to get out. So I got on the bus, and then like 5 minutes later, my bus buddy got on the bus. Asked him, did you bring your pet to school? He goes, no, I'm on the bus, aren't I? I was like, okay, I'm on the bus and I brought mine. He tells me we weren't allowed and then he has to see it. When I opened my bag to show him, it wasn't there. Then I hear my bus driver scream and she swerves the bus. This is part 2 of why bring your pet to school day is banned from my school. So like I said, I'm on the bus and I open my bag to show my friend my pet snake. But when I open my bag, it wasn't there. And then I hear the bus driver scream and she swerves the bus. He yells that there's a snake on the bus, which causes panic. Kids start crying. Some try to jump out the bus window. Like, it was literal chaos. The bus driver almost crashed the whole bus. But she was able to steady it out. But nobody knew where this snake was. I honestly just try to act like I didn't know what was going on. Like, what snake? Never heard of her. Is that some type of drink? Anyways, so luckily, I looked across the seat from me. The seat in front of them, under it was the snake. My friend was sitting on the outside of the bus seat, so I told him to grab it. Try to get him to grab it before anybody sees it, but he didn't, so I just launched over there and I grabbed it, put it in my bag, and continued to act like nothing happened. Okay, so I'm running out of time, so I'm going to zoom past a little bit, but I'll come back on the next part. My school lets us carry our backpacks anywhere we want, so I had the snake in my backpack all day. But 2 periods before chemistry, I decided to let it loose so I could skip the class. So this is part 3 of why bring your pet to school day is banned from my school. Okay, so I'm backtracking a little bit. So after the snake was let loose on the bus, once we got to the school, somebody had to come onto the bus and figure out the situation, what was going on. They asked if anybody brought their pet on the bus. Obviously, I did not give myself up, and they ended up just concluding that a random snake got on the bus. Okay, so back to where I was at. I had a chemistry test that day as well. Like I said, I was very irresponsible, so I did not study for my test, nor did I care for this snake. So I knew the chaos that it would bring to let it loose, so that's what I did. So it could cause chaos, so then I didn't have to take my chemistry test. And half an hour after I let it loose, on the announcements, they tell everybody to stay in their rooms. There is a snake on the loose. Apparently, it was found in a bathroom in a toilet. Somebody sat down on that toilet and had the worst time discovering that snake. Low-key feel bad for them. Once they found it, they put it on the announcements that they found the snake and whoever lost it can come get it, and they described it, so I went to go get it. Okay, so this is part 4 of why bring your pet to school day is banned from my school. Like I said, Jesus Christ, I almost died. So like I said, I went down to the office to claim my snake. I obviously got into a lot of trouble for that. They called my parents. My parents came down to the school. So I got suspended. My parents grounded me for months and months and months. I was not allowed to leave my house. I couldn't go out to see my friends. But I was only suspended for like a week. And when I went back to school, everybody knew that it was me who brought that snake to school. And so the person who sat down on the toilet seat and found the snake knew that it was me too. And that person didn't say anything to me, but I did get word that that person was very pissed because that snake went straight up their, you know. So after that, they just didn't allow kids to bring their pets to school anymore, which is reasonable. I kind of ruined it for everybody else, but I don't really care because it's not that serious. But people can't just hate on me because there was this other kid who brought a spider and it got loose in class. But they were able to find it really quickly, so it didn't escape the classroom or anything. But I did what I had to do, so